Please welcome to the stage Mr. Craig Lesser, former chairman of the Georgia Public Policy Foundation Board of Directors, Carter Burton, president at Spine 360 in Austin, Texas, Jake Hodesh, executive director at the Creative Coast in Savannah, Georgia, Glenn McGonnigle, general partner of Tech Operators in Atlanta, and Brooke Rollins, the president and CEO of the Texas Public Policy Foundation.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's hard to see all of you with the lights, but we're going to have some fun this hour and hopefully learn some things and get some perspective from some folks that have come here from a fairly long distance and some folks that are right here in town. First, we're going to have some questions and comments with our panel members, and then we're going to take some questions and comments from you. So be prepared. First, let's get right to it. We're talking about innovation. We're talking about entrepreneurship. And I guess first, Carter, I want to ask you, you run a company called Spine 360. You lived in Atlanta. The company is based in Austin, Texas.
Yes.
Why don't you bring it here to Georgia?
Yeah, I was afraid that I was going to be up here being introduced as Benedict Arnold this morning. As Craig said, I was here in Atlanta for about 8 years with GE Capital on the capital market side, and then got to know this business that had already never got moved to Austin. It sprang up in Austin, and it has grown. It's about a $50 million business now.
But is there anything we're doing wrong here that would prevent you from coming if all else was equal?
My personal preference, the business being in 29 states and being the president, I'm obviously being pulled by the sales force to go out. Surgeons are the ones who are deciding what implants they're going to use. So I would prefer the business to be in Georgia, but there are things pertaining to the tax rate. There are very intangible things, too. There's a cool factor of Austin and Texas and the pro-business environment, and the sense when you're there that everyone else who is not here wants to come here. It's not the sense that the people in this room are trying to get out of here and go other places. So, there are quantitative things that are specific policy matters. There's a 0% income tax rate in Texas. Obviously, you don't need a calculator to kind of figure out what the difference is there. And with only 15 people in the headquarters running a $50 million company, everyone is fairly well compensated, so they would be very especially sensitive to that difference. But there is an intangible cool factor that it's like being on the USA Olympic basketball team. Who on this Olympic basketball team is eager to go over to Tunisia or something? There's a little bit of that kind of an attitude of we're on the best team.
But you're not suggesting we're Tunisia.
No, I'm not suggesting we're Tunisia.
But you did.
Nor am I trying to insult Atlanta by leaving and going.
No, but there's a lot of discussion that we have from time to time about whether or not we are still cool here in Atlanta. I want to go to you. You're an investor. You're here in Georgia.
Yes.
You've just been elected governor of the state solely responsible for business. Wave the magic wand. You can do anything you want. What are you going to do to encourage entrepreneurs and innovation in our state that we cannot do today?
Yeah, I was hoping you'd ask me that. I've always wanted to have that power to wave the magic wand. We have a lot of things that we're doing right, innovation-wise and future-looking economies in Georgia. So I don't think we start with a clean slate. If I were in that position, I think you look at what we do really well, right? We have, tremendous entrepreneurship happening in our state. There's been several years where the, Kaufman and U.S. Chamber have ranked us #1 or #2 in entrepreneurship in the state of Georgia. I don't know how many of y'all knew that, but that's kind of cool. The problem is, getting it from I'm going to go take the risk and start a company to, the next, successful company with a name on a building, right? And that takes, what does that take, right? That takes innovation, that takes people, that takes access to more people, and it takes capital, right? And we fall down, in a few of those areas where we could be doing more. Talk about people, right? We educate a lot of folks through our state, K through 12, and then we get into the college years. Some great universities in this state. We import folks to come to these universities, and then they leave. So part of it is, we got to figure out how to keep more of them in state, right, out of the college, and that gets back to making us cool, right? I think there's parts of the state that are cool for technology-oriented people. And again, I'm coming at this, Craig, from a technology perspective because I've been a technology entrepreneur and now an investor. But I think it's one of the sectors that really is part of the future economy for the state of Georgia. So you have the people component. And I'm not even going to touch on K through 12 because we all know we need to fix that. Then you have the innovation component, right? And that is our research universities, right? And the bright minds that come out of there. We're doing some things to attract federal grant money and bright folks to take their PhDs and go off and really provide some game-changing things. Fantastic, right? We need more of what it takes to commercialize that around our state. And the third piece, which is the capital component, and that's really the business that I'm in today. We don't have adequate capital to take these companies from idea stage, and these are bright, passionate, largely young entrepreneurs who, maybe they went to see The Social Network and got inspired and said, dadgummit, I'm as smart as those guys, I can do this too. And they want to take that risk, and oftentimes they really are, innovating. And access to capital, is a challenge. We've done a great thing. A couple years ago, we passed the angel tax credit, which has helped over that course of time. And I'm involved in one angel investment organization called Atlanta Technology Angels. Since that time, 24 new companies have been funded. Approximately $3 million has gone into those companies at the earlier seed stage investment, which is great. And all of those investors, I would say most of them have taken advantage of that tax credit. That was a great step, and we need to renew that. I think as a leadership, the next phase of growth for companies beyond the angel investment stage is what is commonly thought of as the venture capital stage, and that's the part, and that's where my current firm plays in the venture capital space, where company is ready to start to grow. It's past the proof of concept and really start to grow, hiring salespeople, marketing, more engineers. And we were just talking backstage a moment ago. Our neighboring states have programs which incents me as a Georgia-based venture capital firm to come to their state and invest in their deals. Georgia didn't have that kind of program, and we need to. We need to have policy which incents and motivates venture firms, both local and afar, to recognize the value of our innovation and our people, and ultimately drive the jobs in the state.
Glenn, be more specific. Exactly what incentives do you have to have?
So, thank you for asking. What we're seeing successfully working in other states are, I have to say, not Solyndra sorts of policies, quite candidly, but policies which do stimulate the economy by providing, for example, pools of capital which are made available through insurance premium tax credits. Florida Growth Fund and the North Carolina and Tennessee are all examples of states that have done this, and I understand the Midwest has done it, and it's happening around. And these are the states that say, look, if you'll come in and actively look for investment opportunities in our state, we will make a pot of that money available to your fund to invest professionally. They don't prescribe which deals I do, because at the end of the day, their contribution to a fund like mine is on par with other commercial and private investors that would invest in a fund. So there's a multiplier effect. In fact, it's 10 to 1 and more multiplier effect. But that specifically is a technique that has worked, and we've been supporting the government legislators who have been receptive to passing a bill similar to that here in our state of Georgia. And we didn't quite get it done last legislative session, but they seem to be receptive to teeing that back up again for 2013.
Good. Well, we'll come back to that. Thank you. Brooke, you run the Policy Institute in Texas. You've worked in government in Texas. You worked in the governor's office. And this morning, the gauntlet was laid out that we should be beating Texas.
I heard. I'm sorry I missed that.
Carter says Austin is cool. What's going on in Texas? I mean, is it just perception? Is it reality? What's going on, and what did government do or not do to create that atmosphere?
Well, first I have to say I'm so grateful to be here. I've, for the last 10 years, have worked with the Texas Public Policy Foundation in Austin, and it's really been in those 10 years that we've seen Texas just reach a new level of job growth and prosperity. And it's been really, really exciting and frankly really gratifying to be in the middle of all of that. Low taxes, limited government, less regulation, a fair judiciary, it really works. Those are the ingredients for a prosperous society. And I love hearing the discussion of other states. It's the genius of our Constitution, I think, and of the Founding Fathers, that they set up our country based on the laboratories of democracy, which are the 50 states, not then. And it's really, really interesting to be a part of that. So I love doing it. Just a couple of facts on Texas you may not know. In the last 5 years, or really even since the Great Recession began, Texas has created more jobs than all other states combined. Just think about what that means and what that is. And I was talking to Carter a little bit earlier and some others who've said they've been to Texas, and it's like the recession hasn't even really affected our state at all. And in many respects, that's absolutely true. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But at the end of the day, we meet entrepreneur after entrepreneur, after doctor, after business person, after just again and again and again, people who are moving in from all over the country to the state of Texas to start a new life, a new business, to relocate their business. Every day, Texas has more than 1,000 people move to Texas from states all over the country. Most of the states they're moving from are California, Ohio, Michigan, and New York. Not surprisingly, I don't know that we get that many Georgians, but still, nevertheless, it is an absolute truth that the original ideals that our country was based on, which is, again, a limited government. Texas has the 49th smallest government per capita in the country. Low taxes. I think we're either the 48th or 49th in terms of how we tax our businesses, how we tax our people, what our tax structure looks like. We have no income tax. Those policies work. One of my favorite Georgians of all time is Senator Phil Gramm, who of course is now a Texan, but he still loves his Georgia, and I've heard him say again and again and again, ideas matter, and they absolutely matter. And I think that is frankly what's so important about events like today. I'm so grateful to my colleagues at the Georgia Public Policy Foundation, for so many of you who are legislators and staff members working every day to make Georgia a better place to live and work and raise a family, that these ideas and what you do really, truly matters. Is Texas perfect? Certainly not. We have a lot of things we have to work on. K-12 education, we're going through a big reform of our higher education institutions right now. There's some maneuvering within our tax structure we're working on to try to move from more of a property tax-based tax structure to a consumption tax-based structure. But through it all, especially in the last 10 years and really since we've had a very forward-thinking governor that I think he may have been here last year, but he says the greatest 3 hours of his life is when he was leading in the polls for the presidential election, the greatest 3 hours, which is about right. But it was very interesting to live and be part of that as well, because it really lifted the Texas model up, frankly, to the rest of the country while he was running for president. And, you know, we had a lot of detractors like the New York Times, not surprisingly, and some others who wrote that the Texas model and the Texas miracle was all a mirage, and they listed any number of reasons why it had nothing to do with low taxes and limited government. But in fact, all of those that they pointed out, especially those from the left, and we've got a lot of those in Texas too who are constantly pushing for bigger government and higher taxes and implementing an income tax. Why that system doesn't work. So I applaud Georgia. I applaud the Georgia Public Policy Foundation. I applaud entrepreneurs sitting on this stage who are really looking forward and who can, what my good friend John Tillman said this morning, maybe beat Texas someday. And I think we've set a pretty high bar, but we look forward to the competition. And again, I'm so grateful to be here. So thank you.
Thank you, Brooke. And we will beat Texas. Jake, you head up the Creative Coast down in Savannah. You're about keeping our young people in the Savannah community. You're about entrepreneurship, and you're about innovation. What are the challenges you're facing in Savannah?
I also echo, thank you so much for having me here, representing Savannah. Always happy to do so. I would say some of the key issues that we face, and I don't think we're alone, as you suggested, Texas and other places as well. We always constantly look at education issues, so that is K through 12 as well as higher ed. We look at poverty and what poverty represents in our neighborhoods and in our communities. And I'm thinking from a perspective of an entrepreneur who's interested in starting a business, say, in your town. What does your education system look like if they're going to grow a family? Do they want to send their kids to school in your town? What does the poverty and crime look like in your neighborhoods and in your towns? That's a representation of the community at large. Is that a place where I want to live and be? And then we had talked about this yesterday, but quality of life. And that's a difficult one because every community thinks they have a great quality of life, so it's hard to compare one community's quality of life to another. But the reality is that, at least for entrepreneurs and innovation-based companies, you can generally work or live anywhere. And that's a benefit for us in Savannah. We have a great place to live and work. It's a great community to be a part of. And so we have a lot of people wanting to move to Savannah to start their companies or to launch an innovation-based startup. And they're helping to transform our community, which is really exciting. The most exciting piece of that is that they are going and impacting the schools, poverty, and crime rates. As they kind of infill into the community, they're making an impact, not just in the economy, but they're getting involved in the education system. They're extremely active in their community and affecting change in poverty and in crime rates, which is really exciting and helping build this community. It's this weird interconnectedness that is making the communities robust. If you look at a town like Austin, which we actually from Savannah we lead trips to towns like Austin and Brooklyn, Portland, Oregon, to see what can happen when change agents and young, excited entrepreneurs affect a community. If you look at a town like Austin, would Austin 30 years ago have thought they would have been this hipster innovation hub? That's a big question mark. I would argue probably not. But what's happened is people found this place and they became so involved in this community that they weren't going to let it go backwards. They had drunk the Kool-Aid 100% and they became involved, and that pushes Austin to a new place. For places like Atlanta, Savannah, Cincinnati, and otherwise, how do we attract interesting, dynamic people who are going to affect positively our communities, and how do we keep them so that they can drive this community, this city, this culture, this ecosystem? How do they drive it forward? Mm-hmm. That's what we focus on every day.
So it doesn't just happen by happenstance. You have to have some really committed people in the legislature and outside who are willing to work together and put together a campaign. It takes funding. For those of you who are funders in the audience, none of this happens without money. You know, we're outspent in Texas probably 100 to 1 in terms of the union money we have and the different organizations and the trial lawyers. But ideas matter. The right thing can win the day if you're organized and committed to it. The public-private partnership in Texas is a fairly new idea. We implemented that, I think, about 8 years ago because transportation, we had so many people moving into the state, we had so many businesses relocating through the years that I think transportation is probably an issue everywhere, frankly. It sounded like it was a big one here in Georgia. That we believed that the way to solve some of those issues was through public-private partnership. And we'll see how it works out. You're right. You have to strike a really good balance. But the Texas Department of Transportation has, I believe, 3,000 or 4,000 engineers, which seems absolutely ludicrous to me. And they are not, we just believe that there was a way to infuse privatization into our transportation issues that would help move the state forward. And so far, I mean, there have been some bumps on the road, no pun intended. There have been some bumps along the way, but I would say that so far, I think it's probably been hailed as a success and one that's allowed us to build infrastructure that's desperately needed, especially around the Austin area, some around Dallas-Fort Worth. So I think your points are very well made, and I think that those are always issues, and a lot of people in Texas have a real problem with the fact that Centra is a Spanish company from Spain. I don't have that problem, but a lot of people do. If they're doing the best job, then they deserve the business. But a lot of people in Texas are worried about that. The issue's gone away a little bit in the last few years because it's really been a fairly smooth ride recently, but points well made.
Just one example from Savannah, and I don't know if this answers your question directly, but I'll give it a shot. Gulfstream is headquartered in Savannah. Awesome company. We're really happy to have them in Savannah, and we're happy to have them in Georgia. They invest a lot of money in K through 12 education. They're literally in the schools in Chatham, Bryan, and Effingham County, the 3 counties that essentially make up our MSA. And they're investing in programs, in students. They have a student leadership program. I mean, they're in the schools every single day, and they have a staff of about 8 people that work on this every single day. The goal there is a workforce. That's their workforce pipeline. They're saying we're going to invest right now in our public schools, no public dollars. They take real money out of their coffers to invest in a workforce. This is workforce development. This is their pipeline. It's incredible. I don't know of a lot of corporations outside of them that are doing that, and they won't know for another 10 years whether or not this is going to pay off, but they're dedicated to doing it because they're not going to wait around. And I see a lot of people watching that and wondering what is going to happen with that, and I see a lot of other corporations, not the size of Gulfstream, but other smaller corporations in our region that are paying attention to that and starting to get involved in the public schools, because if we can expose students to aerospace technology, if we can expose students to web development and other technologies at a young age and show them you have to graduate from high school, you have to go on to some sort of higher ed, whether it's a 2-year institution, 4-year institution, graduate school, whatever it is. And if you do this, this is the type of job you can have, this is the types of wages that you can earn, and this is where you can stay in our community and work. The earlier we expose students to that, the better we all are for that. And that's one key program that's going on in our region that many companies, early startups and otherwise, are starting to clue in on and providing internships and co-ops. And all of a sudden you have web developers, graphic designers, technicians, engineers in the classrooms in our public schools, and it's making a huge impact.
Brooke?
I'm going to go at this from a little bit of a different angle, and I think this is to your question. Since 1948, there have been 83 months of unemployment over 8%. 83 months since 1948 of unemployment over 8%. 47 of those months have been under this current White House. Not that this is a bashing of I'm not here to do that, but I will say this has all been in certain recent history. This is a pretty astonishing and a little bit scary fact. But what's even more frightening than that is that doesn't include the people who've left the workforce because they are very discouraged and can't find a job. And so what you have happening is the people who are moving to Texas are coming to Texas looking for employment. They haven't left the workforce. They are actively seeking employment. If you are to include those people and we've got some economists in the room probably much better at this than I, but it's my understanding that if you were to include those people who've left the workforce, no longer looking for employment, but they could be employed, the unemployment rate is actually closer to 12, 13, 14%. These are levels that are comparable to Spain, to France, even to Greece. Greece is higher than that, but our country is in a state of crisis. My point is this. We have people moving to Texas looking for employment, and most of the time finding employment. What you do in Georgia matters. They're coming because we have an incredibly high job growth. We have tremendous amount of opportunity. So to your point about sort of the mid-level, not the rocket scientists, not the guys who are curing cancer, but great Americans, great patriots who just want to work, have a job, raise their family, and be productive citizens, those are the people who are now moving to Texas. And so when Georgia's looking at your competitiveness, I think that's a really important point that you made that I hadn't really thought of, that you will begin to also get some of that inflow of the people that are out there that really do want to be productive members, that are looking for a great job, that can add a lot to companies that are being started and great companies that are moving along that are growing. So I think that's a really important piece of where is Georgia in the competitiveness, and who are you trying to attract to your state to become citizens?
One final question to close this out, because we have run out of time. But to that point, and it gets back to the cool factor, it gets back to the factor that Texas is creating a lot of jobs and people are going there, not necessarily knowing what their jobs are going to be, but they know that there are opportunities there. We in Georgia, and I dare say many other states, many other countries, have typically in their economic development strategies have picked out sectors and said, we are going to be great, we are going to compete in certain sectors. That's fine in some areas, but are we at the point now where we just have to create the atmosphere and let entrepreneurs and innovators just do what they do, and whatever those sectors are, let's just encourage them? Does that make any sense?
Yes.
And I've talked way too much, so I'm going to keep it very short and then let the rest of the panel. But my thought about that is you are absolutely right. I think when government starts picking winners and losers, you are not going to have the sort of results that you hope to have. I mean, government should not be in the business of saying, this sector, this sector, this sector, we're choosing you, we're going to give you extra funds, we're going to build you roads. Instead, government should be in the business of getting out of the way, making it, again, limiting the government, lowering taxes, and just opening up your state for business.
Glenn, final note?
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly what we want to drive to, is turn loose the spirit of these entrepreneurs, and what will happen is centers of competence will start to emerge. In technology, I was involved, about 15 years ago in a company here in town called Internet Security Systems. That grew, and it was ultimately sold to IBM. Big successful company, and what that has spawned is dozens of early stage startups who have gone on to build their own companies. And we now have a center of competence in Georgia for entrepreneurs who want to start a company in the cybersecurity, information security space, which is world class. People come here, from all around the world if they want to start security companies. The government didn't tell us to do that. They just got out of the way and let us do it.
Final note.
Yes, to that same point, what we see in Savannah with a lot of the startups and the innovation, a lot of the technology is feeding the port and logistics as well as aerospace. Nobody's saying that. Nobody's saying to do that. It's happening because entrepreneurs are seeking opportunities.
And Carter, you have the last word.
I couldn't agree more. It's about creating that climate. It's not about the government facilitating the buildup of this industry or this industry or this industry. It's about creating a climate overall, because it's a decentralized economy that we work in now. I don't even have a desk phone anymore. I have the phone that's in my pocket, and it's with me wherever I am. And so you don't have to be in any one particular place. You can build a business wherever you have a great lifestyle and the things. So it's about creating the climate, the fertile field, and not about necessarily picking what gets planted.
We're going to get you back here. Spine 360 is going to be in Georgia. Thank this panel for their great